Hey everybody, Matt Steichen here. I'm coming to you from Lakeville, Minnesota, with some more thoughts on things going on in the Bob Dylan world. If you're watching this video, you probably know who LeRoy Hoikkala is. He was the drummer in Bob's first bands in Hibbing, a member of the Golden Chords. Along with Bob, they played together at the Winter Frolic talent show, and they organized a teen dance together at the Armory. The name of the band, the Golden Chords, came from LeRoy's golden drum set and Bob's ability to play chords on the piano. LeRoy died yesterday in Hibbing. He was a lifelong Hibbing resident. I was lucky enough to actually meet LeRoy once in 2018 when my family and I were up there for Dylan Days. It was just a really cool moment for me to be able to connect with somebody that was part of Bob's. I really thought it was impressive that LeRoy really understood his role within the Bob Dylan story. He didn't embellish his role. He didn't to be more important than he was. He was just willing to sit down with me for a while and share everything he could remember. And you could tell every once in a while that would happen, and he was always willing to share his thoughts. The role he played in that small moment in history. It was just something to him that happened a long time ago. It wasn't any big deal, but he understood that it was really important to other people, and he was always willing to share everything he could remember on that. I remember he even pointed out to me how funny he thought it was that he could go into the grocery store in Hibbing or other stops around town and no one would say a word to him. And then every so often, some wide-eyed person from out of town would show up and ask him all sorts of questions and be incredibly interested in what he had to say. So I really enjoyed getting to talk to LeRoy that one time. He signed a picture for me of one of his old bands, and told me a bunch of stories about growing up with Bobby Zimmerman. And like I said on Facebook, people like BJ Rolfson, Bob's high school English teacher, are really unsung ambassadors of a community like Hibbing. Every year, tens of thousands of people show up in that town, and they don't want to talk to the mayor or somebody in city council. They're looking for a connection to Bob Dylan's Hibbing from the 1950s, and I'm very grateful that LeRoy provided that for me and my family. You can read some of the thing by listening to the Bob Dylan episode I did on Ring Them Bells, where I told Rob about a few of the things that I talked to LeRoy about when I was up in Hibbing a couple of years ago. The Golden Chords didn't play original material. I talked to LeRoy about the kind of things that they listen to and the things they like to play, and he told me they like to play Little Richard style rhythm and blues covers and other songs that both I heard on the southern stations that made up to Hibbing once it got dark outside. So that segues in nicely into the thing I was going to talk about originally in this vlog today, which is the top 10 songs I wouldn't if not for Bob Dylan. I've always said that even if Bob never wrote a song, he's made an incredible impact on the way I listen to music and what music I listen to. I was just yesterday morning doing the dishes in the kitchen, and I was listening to some music on Spotify. And the three songs in a row that played were Froggy Went A-Courtin' and Braggin' and Red Cadillac and a Black Mustache. And I thought, oh, that's funny. I just listened to three songs by Bob Dylan and none of them are originals. And he's always known as an artist that's covered a lot, but he's not necessarily widely known as someone who is a great interpreter of other people's materials. And I think that's where he's really underrated as a performer. He's put down so many great covers over the years, and in so many different ways, he's influenced the types of music I listen to outside of his own music. I really think he's underrated as a musicologist. He probably knows more about the music of the last 100 years than any person alive, and that covers all genres. Some people even said that Murder Most Foul might have a reference to an Eminem song in it, and he said he likes Run DMC, and he likes Gershwin, and he likes musical, and he likes classical, and he likes country and rock and rhythm and blues. He doesn't discriminate. He really is an expert on so many different areas of music. And if you followed him over the years like I have, you know that he loves to talk about music. No Direction Home showed up on Netflix this morning, and the first half of No Direction Home is almost entirely Bob talking about the other artists that he grew up listening to and that he met in New York that influenced him, and he drew inspiration from John Jacob Niles, Detta, and Woody Guthrie, and Hank Williams, and Lefty Frizzell. So many artists of that era that really helped shape him into the kind of music he wanted to make. Then, of course, there's Theme Time Radio Hour, over 100 episodes over 3 seasons, where he talks about and shares the music that inspired him and that he's interested in. There's the covers that he plays in concert over the years, the artists that he chooses to expose to his audience by having them open for him or share the bill with him. Things like the Music Cares speech, where he largely draws on lessons he learned from other musicians or things he picked up by hearing different songs. Murder Most Foul, like I said, is just full of references to songs by other performers that he appreciates and that I guess helped him kind of spiritually recover from the JFK assassination, and even conversations he has on the street over the years whenever fans have showed up on Expecting Rain or other chat rooms and stuff and said they happened to run into Bob or something. Usually when people talk about having long conversations with him is because they find a mutual artist they like to talk about. And it seems like whenever he has an interview, like the Rome interview, for example, he always wants to turn the conversation to people like Robert Johnson. And I always thought I should learn about as much as I can about Robert Johnson, because if I ever do run into Bob on the street, if I can hold a conversation about Robert Johnson, I might have a chance of holding his attention for a while. So I made a list of 10 songs that I would not know if it wasn't for Bob Dylan. And at number 10, I start with At the Beginning with Baby Let Me Follow You Down. From the beginning, Bob's kind of put his own slant on things. Baby Let Me Follow You Down appeared on his self-titled first album. And in that first New York Times review that landed him his Columbia contract, Robert Shelton doesn't talk about how Bob's a great lyricist and he's got potential to be a spokesman or anything like that. He talks about how Bob's a distinctive stylist. He hadn't developed his lyrical, so he continued to reinterpret that song over the years. Number 9, I've listened to this one a few times yesterday. I just love David Bromberg's version of Catskill Serenade. David Bromberg is an artist that we've been opened up to through his connection with Bob Dylan. He kind of has a parallel career to Bob Dylan in many ways. He's a Jewish guy from upstate New York, and he came to Greenwich Village in the late 60s and kind of the second wave after Bob, and he crosses genres and plays a little bit of everything, and he's still playing up to this day. He played guitar on Self Portrait and New Morning, and then of course reconnected with Bob in 1992 for the Bromberg sessions when Bob covered David Bromberg's song Catskill Serenade. And it's such an unusual song. It's about the story of Rip Van Winkle, like an old story about a guy who wanders off into the mountains and he comes back and it's 20 years later and he doesn't know anyone anymore, and he doesn't nobody recognizes him, and everything he would have recognized is gone. And it's such a creepy, weird song, and the instrumentation on the Bromberg sessions just perfectly captures that mood of like that weird, mysterious vibe. And while I'm on the topic of the Bromberg sessions, I also have to talk about Polly Vaughan, which is another song that the instrumentation perfectly captures the atmosphere and paints a picture of the song. So if you want to go on YouTube, you should find those performances from the Bromberg sessions. Number 8, I chose Don't Let Us Get Sick by Warren Zevon. And like David Bromberg, Warren Zevon's an artist who I could have put 20 songs in this spot, because ever since Bob played the covers of Warren Zevon in 2002 when Zevon was ill and he died the next year, those covers Bob performed really opened my eyes to Warren Zevon's catalog, and I started listening to him a lot. But Don't Let Us Get Sick, I think, is such a perfect, simple song structurally, but it just is so impactful. And when he sings, I thought of my friends and the troubles they've had to keep me from thinking of mine. It's such a simple, understated way to look at life and what it means to have empathy for other people and to care for each other as humans. Um, and then, of course, the refrain, don't let us get sick, don't let us get old, don't let us get stupid, all right. Just make us be brave and make us play nice and let us be together tonight. At number 7, I put The Lakes of Ponchartrain by Paul Brady. Bob's been influenced by these old Irish ballads and sailor songs and whatnot since his earliest days in the village. And apparently in the 90s, sometime he's looked for Paul Brady. He wanted to meet him so Paul Brady could teach him how to play Lakes of Ponchartrain. And it's such a beautiful song, again, that really tells a story very vividly, old traditional song. And the Irish ballads of Paul Brady, like Arthur McBride and Lakes of Ponchartrain, are really beautiful songs. And I would never have been exposed to that genre if Bob hadn't covered those songs on Good As I've Been to You. At number 6, I have Lady Came from Baltimore by Tim Hardin. This is, again, one of those seemingly simple songs. Sometimes over the years, Bob will compliment the song by saying, like, I should have written that song. Like, it's so simple and to the core that it just seems like the idea was just floating out in space, waiting for someone to grab it. And Lady Came from Baltimore, it's got that timeless quality that so many Bob songs have, where it's got thieves and guys that live outside the law and ladies, and it's just got that timeless language, and it's a really powerful, simple song. And he covered it in 1994, I believe, which is where I first heard it. Number 5 is a kind of goofy one. It's Mr. Blue by the Fleetwoods. Bob never played the song live. I think it's on one of the bootleg series sessions. But I learned about it just a couple of years ago when Bob did an interview with Bill Flanagan for his website. And Bill Flanagan asked him if he ever did intros for his songs, because some of the songs on Triplicate had kind of intros. And he said, I've never done that. I think you have to put in those last after you write the song. And Bob said, I've always liked the one for Mr. Blue, the one where our guardian star lost all his glow. And I'd never heard of that song before. So when Bob said that, I downloaded Mr. Blue by the Fleetwoods, and I was not disappointed. And the vocalist on that song, it's such a pretty song, and it is a very wonderful intro. Bob was right about that. At number 4, 1952, Vincent Black Lightning by Richard Thompson. I did not know who Richard Thompson was before he opened for Bob on the Americana-Rama tour in 2013. We really enjoyed seeing Richard Thompson a couple nights in a row on that tour. So I started digging into his back catalog and found a lot of Richard Thompson songs I really like. And of course, the song itself, it's a love story told around the story of a motorcycle. And it makes sense listening to it that that's a song that Bob would like. And then, of course, Bob played it live one time on the end of that tour. Number 3 is You're Too Late by Lefty Frizzell. Bob covered it once, like in the early 2000s or late 90s on the Never Ending Tour. It's that 50s country style song with pedal steel that seems to have really influenced the sound of albums like Nashville Skyline. And when Bob did that one man's concert for that Swedish television show in 2015, I think, or 2014, he played You're Too Late. And I really hope the full recording of that shows up someday, because the part of the song that was on that TV show was so beautiful, and we really need to get the entire 4-song set from that TV show. That was Lefty Frizzell at number 3. And then at number 2, Far From Me by John Prine. John Prine said that he based the outline of this song after Hattie Carroll, where the verses tell a story and then the refrain is kind of like a summary that wraps it all together. And it's got such classic John Prine's type lines in it. We used to laugh together and we danced to any old song. You know, she still laughs with me, but she waits just a second too long. And will you still see me tomorrow? No, I've got too much to do. Well, a question ain't really a question if you know the answer to. John Prine said that he thought Far From Me was his greatest song. And it's definitely one of my favorites. And John Prine is another artist who hearing Bob's cover of People Putting People Down and then reading Bob's comments about John Prine really made me look into his music. So I'm really grateful for that. And then at number one, I have That Lucky Old Sun. And really, it's representing all of Shadows in the Night, because I just think that album is so well executed, and it exposed me to an entire genre I'd never listened to before. That 1940s and 50s Frank Sinatra era song, those traditional songs from that era, and they're just so sonically and vocally beautiful on the record. And when the concept of that album came out, everyone was skeptical, it seemed like, but Bob put a spin on those songs and just pulled it off better than anyone really could have expected. He really put so much emotional weight into those songs in Shadows of the Night. Of all the 1950s pre-rock era cover albums he's done, these last three, I really think Shadows in the Night is just the superior one of those three. Some just really great performances on that record. And of course, Bob covered it a few times during the Neverending Tour. On the latest one, he only played it once in 2017, and he closed the show here in St. Paul with it. And it was just a amazing performance, so majestic to close out the show with that song, an unexpected performance. And you can just tell when he sings those songs that music almost means more to him than his own music. And that's one thing that these songs all seem to have in common, is when he performs them, they mean so much to him, and he's able to connect with them so well that he pulls them off in a way that he rarely does with his own material. He told AARP a few years ago, a song like I'm a Fool to Want You, I know that song. I can sing that song. I felt every word in that song. I mean, I know that song. It's like I wrote it. It's easier for me to sing a song like that than it is to sing Won't You Come See Me, Queen Jane. At a time that wouldn't have been so, but now it is, because Queen Jane might be a little outdated. I disagree with that, Bob, but okay. Then he says, but this song is not outdated. It has to do with human emotion. There's nothing contrived in these songs. There's not one false word in any of them. They're eternal. So that's what Bob said about the songs on Shadows in the Night. I made a top 10 list, so I'm going to throw in a few honorable mentions here. Shake Sugary by Elizabeth Cotten, Dark as a Dungeon, Little Moses, all the stuff on Good As I've Been to You and World Gone Wrong, Bottom of the Barrel, and a few other songs by Amos Lee, who opened for him a couple times. The Clancy Brothers and Tommy Makem, their songs. Roy Acuff's songs like Wait for the Light to Shine, Searching for the Soldier's Grave, Red Cadillac and a Black Mustache that he played for that Sun Records tribute album. Again, that was a song you could tell he grew up with it, and it brought so much joy out of him to perform that song. So that's a wrap on this episode of Matt's Bob Dylan Thoughts. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll put some links in the description for some of the stuff I referenced in this video. Thanks for tuning in.